So tá fáilte ród gach duine. It's so lovely to see so many faces to the first of our series of webinars, Almost Áitse, growing our approach to place-based learning. And it's just great to see so many different organizations. And I think it's really pertinent that we're beginning in the season of Imbolc, this point in time on our Celtic calendar where the earth is slowly waking up and coming out after a long, dark winter. And the theme of this webinar being resilience in a time of accelerating change. And I think it's so reflected in this season of Imbolc, that we've survived the darkness of winter and we're slowly awakening to this beautiful season of springtime. And we're so lucky and delighted to have Dolores Whelan here with us to start us off. And just to say, Dolores has been working in this area of reclaiming our Indigenous spiritual tradition here in Ireland and the wisdom of the land here in Ireland. And so we just really thought who better to centre us and to begin the conversation today. So I'll hand it over to you, Dolores, and thank you so much for being with us. And just to say as well, sorry, Dolores is also involved very heavily very deeply in the Brigid of Fehard Festival. So she's taken some valuable time out of those, all of the work there to be with us today. So thank you so much, Dolores. Thank you.
Well, tá fáilte ród, tá mé I must see in Acala Fahard, the hill of Fahard on Och a Rugo is a Togo on our Nave Breed. So I'm sitting here, my house is in a direct line with the hill of Fahard. I didn't know that when I built it, but Brigid did. And so I have a direct line with her. And so we are in the middle of celebrating quite a major Brigid of Fahard Festival, the 17th year that we've done this. And we celebrate Brigid as goddess, as saint, Celtic Christian saint, and as wise guide for the 21st century. Because one of the things about a goddess, it's an archetypal energy that has many different qualities. And those archetypal energies can be transmuted and can be evolved in line with the particular culture they're in. So we had Brigid, the goddess, and as a goddess, she was the bringer of spring. Brigid of the sunrise, rising with the springtime, rising with the midtime, healing all the land. See you in the soft clouds, see you in the winds of change blowing through the land. And I think that she is a hugely important voice that is being recovered amazingly at this time. And because she has the voice of wisdom, the voice of antiquity, but always expressed in an appropriate way for our time. And here in Dundalk, in County Louth, we have celebrated the Brigid Festival for many years. And we now have the most amazing icon, mural. I really invite you to look at it because it shows the two faces of Brigid, the pre-Christian goddess and the Christian saint, and that harmony between them, because one is an evolution of the other. And in these times that we're in now, I see her as a voice of wisdom in a world that's desperately in need of wisdom rather than smartness or cleverness or even knowledge, because it's at that deep place of wisdom that we get what we need in order to be able to become catalysts for transformation. She was a catalyst for transformation in her time. And very interestingly, what is so important about Brigid, she always stands on the boundary between two different possibilities, and she holds the tension between those, and in doing so, she brings forth the next step. So she was born of a pagan father and a Christian slave woman. So here we have her boundarying both the pre-Christian, a pagan tradition, which I don't usually use very much. I use the pre-Christian indigenous spiritual tradition, because that's what it is. And then the early Celtic Christian tradition, which is extremely difficult, extremely different from what we know as many Orthodox Catholicisms or Protestantism, because when Christianity came to Ireland, the wonderful thing was that it forged a bond with what was here before, and it worked in a beautiful evolutionary way. It wasn't one throwing the other out and replacing it. It was an evolution. So Brigid is she's the harbinger of spring, and she breathes. And it's a lovely quote where it says, "Brigid breathes life into the mouth of dead winter." And when I hear that, I say, so what exactly is she breathing life into the mouth of dead winter? Well, I think many of us in this group would know that the way our culture is moving and the way the world is moving is becoming like a dead winter for many, many things, for many people, and certainly for many species in our community of animals and plants and birds. So she's breathing life, a new possibility into that mouth of what has become dead. And one of the things I love about Imbolc, and I was speaking to Nicola about this, Imbolc is a very fragile time. The Celtic year begins at Samhain in November, going down into the darkness till we get to the winter solstice, and then a very gradual rising until we come to Imbolc. But the light that was caught at the winter solstice is growing quite slowly, and it is a fragile time, because we can still have terrible snowstorms, we can have awful weather, and things that are beginning to grow can be killed. So I think that's an important piece in terms of this conversation, that Imbolc is a time of amazing possibilities, but also fragility, and with no guarantee that what we labor with will actually survive and evolve into what it might possibly be. So I see this as like, and then, sorry, go back to Brigid, because Brigid is this beautiful goddess figure. She's a nurturer. She's a feminine energy, and her job is to nurture us at this time so that we can hold those seeds or buds of the new beginning. And so she's there, she's holding us, she's supporting us, and yet she can't make us be anything other than we choose. Am I doing okay with time?
That's wonderful, Dolores. Thank you so much. I think that you're right on time.
Okay.
And yeah, and the celebration of Brigid and her being given her National Day this year is probably right on time as well. So thank you so much for being with us.
Well, just one more thing, if I could, is that what has risen through the rising of the feminine consciousness in Ireland has allowed that national holiday and this extraordinary celebration of Brigid to happen. Yes, I think it wouldn't have happened without the years and years and years of work that many people were doing on the edges. And I always think of Ivan Boland, who once said, "It's a foolish center that ignores the margins." And it's the role of the margins to influence and redefine the center. And I think that's what has happened. So Brigid has moved from the edge into the center.
Amazing. And to carry on with that theme of margins, a woman who knows permaculture and the importance of margins very well, I'll hand you back over to Eileen, who's going to just put a bit of structure on this conversation and give us a bit of background. Thank you, Eileen, and thank you, Dolores. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, Dolores. That's very inspirational and very timely. Unfortunately, I have to deal with all the very, very boring stuff. So my name is Eileen Flanagan. I'm based here in Cloughjordan Ecovillage, and I'm the project manager on the Creating Centres of Excellence for Community Climate Action, which is a bit of a mouthful, which is a project that is part of the Community Climate Action Programme, funded by the Government of Ireland through the Department of Environment, Climate and Communications, and administered by Pobble. We have to say that. So this project is led by us here in Cloughjordan Ecovillage, and we have been for the past year looking at the roles and challenges being faced by place-based centres. And we're honoured to be joined in that by Sonairte, the National Ecology Centre in Meath, which Nicola represents. Also the Burren College of Art, and Chris Chapman, who is speaking today, is part of that, and Carrickdoola Permaculture Farm in County Wicklow. And our aim in this project is to develop a set of resources that address the challenges that place-based learning centres that engage in aspects of community and climate can use to assist them. So in order to figure it out what people wanted or the challenges that we were facing, we talked to a lot of centres and asked them what their challenges were, and a lot of common themes came up. And this webinar series is our response, or part of our response to that. So we have a series of 5 webinars that address the key challenges. We have this one today, which is a reflective conversation on how and why we do what we do. Next week, we're going to be exploring the very exciting world of the Irish language and culture and its role in community climate action. The following week, we'll be looking at the topic of engaging our wider communities, how and why it's important to do that, and that includes marginalised communities as well. We have a webinar. Burnout was one of the key things that people were struggling with. So we have a webinar on minding ourselves. So how do we prevent or deal with burnout? And then the final one will look at the role that a solidarity network could play. So it's an exciting program, and anybody that's here can access any of those. So, and it's important to say as well that these challenges are not just faced by organisations that are working in community climate action. So hopefully our resources will have a reach beyond the immediate scope of the project. And we're hoping that all of those resources will be available around May, and we will be having a launching event for those. So that's very exciting. Thanks very much for coming today. Really appreciate it. And I'll hand back to you, Nicola.
Thanks so much, Eileen. And so before I introduce our 3 speakers and read their bios, I just invite you again to just come back to the theme resilience in a time of accelerating change, and just again Imbolc and this kind of slow awakening of the earth, and how we chose this webinar, the first in line with this time of year, to be more reflective and inward focused. So maybe just to reflect on, as you're listening to the speakers, how do you navigate uncertainty in your own life? And as Eileen says, any kind of tools or links or anything that you want to share on that kind of personal level as well would be really welcome. And so so we have Thomas Riedmuller, who's here from the Hollies. And Thomas was born in 1962 in Germany. He's one of 4 founding members of the Hollies Centre for Sustainability, a small eco-village near Enniskeen in West Cork, which has just celebrated its 1/4 century of operating and currently has 26 residents in 7 households. Thomas lives in a cob house he built with his wife Ulrika and is the father of 4 home-educated sons. He divides his time between organising and teaching a wide range of courses and community projects at the Hollies, teaching permaculture design, leadership and entrepreneurship at Cork College of Further Education and Training at its Kinsale campus, as well as working freelance as a family and elder mediator. His activities straddle the areas of natural building, woodland management, food foraging, community development, and conflict facilitation. And then we have Julie Lockett, has been a member of Cloughjordan Ecovillage since 2005, where she's raised her 2 sons. She is an Ecovillage educator and coordinator of this project. She is also co-owner of Riot Rye Bakehouse and Bread School with her husband, Joe Fitzmaurice. And her work as a dance artist over the last 23 years has been variously funded by the Arts Council, Culture Ireland, and county councils. And she has taught and presented work nationally and internationally. And we have Chris Chapman of the Burren College of Art. Chris leads facilitation processes for the Burren College of Art, developing approaches to collective creativity that help to meet contemporary complex challenges. The college has been involved in systemic initiatives around climate change narratives, the future of education, and the future of the Irish language. But it's also is deeply involved in helping community groups in North Clare to work together on issues that require a more than local response. So I'm so looking forward to the unfolding of this conversation with each of you, and thank you so much for being with us. So I think we'll launch straight into the first question, and first, maybe Thomas, if you're happy to begin. So our first question is simply, why do you keep doing what you're doing? We know this work is really difficult. There's, and it seems to be becoming increasingly more challenging with all of the poly crises we're facing and how they're intersecting. And yeah, I suppose just to begin with, what motivates you and why do you keep doing it? So I'll hand it over to you, Thomas.
Okay, thank you, Nicola. Yeah, I imagine everybody can hear me. Before I go into what motivates me to keep going, I'd like to say a few words about what motivated me to get started. Back in Germany, I suppose when I became aware of politically interested and so on as a teenager, I actually grew up in a Germany that was very aware of all these things already. I suppose you might be aware that when Chernobyl happened in 1986, the Germans took it so seriously and didn't eat any lettuce or didn't buy anything on the farmers' markets anymore because they were so afraid of the cloud. Whereas then if you went over the Rhine west in France, it went over, people just did, Jesus, the Germans are mad. And when the whole thing at the Club of Rome in 1992, no, actually, the Club of Rome was in the 70s. So I remember the publication of when the Club of Rome sort of wrote about the limits of growth. I heard about that, and it was a big thing. It was discussed on the kitchen table. And I suppose my parents, they grew up in the Second World War, and that was discussed, and all the politics were discussed on the kitchen table. So my brother and I, we grew up really anti-war, anti-violence, because my father and my mother had experienced it firsthand. And they were not Nazis. They were actually, they were Catholic, and they were sort of protected from Hitler. Anyway, just a little bit of a background. And the military service and did the alternative to the obligatory military service, which was twice as long. And so anyway, I suppose I had a long story all my life of being aware of the things that matter to me now as well, which is non-violence and which is a care for the earth. But it wasn't until I started a family myself. So my first son is born in 1992. He's now heading up to be 32 years of age. When I started the family, I really started thinking long term in terms of, oh, wow, my life matters now in a different way. I have a duty to look after these children for the rest of my life. And maybe they'll also give me some grandchildren one day. It's sort of something of long-term thinking kicked in. And my wife and I, we somehow, and we thought, Jesus, we were living at the time near Heidelberg, which is near Ludwigshafen and Mannheim. It's one of the most densely populated and most polluted, most industrialized areas of Europe. And doctors were sort of recommending, if you don't want your children to get asthma, move away. And so we permaculture course somewhere in Munich taught by an Englishman, and I thought, gee, permaculture, what's that? You know, so anyway, there's a bit of a story, and then we left Germany in a van with our 3 little children to look for the right place and the right people to team up with, and that brought us to Ireland. And the Hollies is that place. So just I thought it might be good to just give you a little bit of sort of my original motivation, and that this is not just an interest. It's a passion, but it's more than that. It's not just a fleeting passion. It's my life, and so I care for my family, for our children, but really for all the families. All the children, because to me this is wider. You know, it's not just my family of origin in Germany or my family here in Ireland. It's not just you know, I have multiple identities. I was studying languages, so I'm fluent in Spanish, French, English, and German, and I'm also hellbent on learning Irish. So to me, all those languages, I'm interested in learning these languages because of the people interest me. So the care for the families around me, but also you know, the ancestors, actually they are calling us, and I'm getting to an age now where I hear them calling us, and I want to be a good ancestor. So, you know, you might have come across deep ecology. That's really a part of what it is. God help us to be, you know, or Brigid help us to be a good ancestor. So that's my some of my motivation. What keeps me going? I actually enjoy the challenge. I prefer that challenge, although it's hard at times, and I have suffered burnout for months and been incapacitated and contracted all sorts of stuff because of that. But I got through it because I still prefer to invest in hope rather than doom and gloom. So I also spent 7 years working as a radio journalist, which was just only compacting the doom and the gloom and you know, hitting into the same sort of, yeah, and one wave to sort of cancelling out the next, and all short-term sort of and day to day, no, hour to hour new news, Jesus. You know, and I had to sort of cut that out of my life, give it up, and get in the van and seek some freedom about this. So I try not to watch I don't watch news at all. So I have no television, no time for that, and I'm very selective of what information I sort of allow my to cloud my mind. So hope rather than doom. And permaculture, you know, this sometimes lightly quoted permaculture principle that Bill Mollison, one of the in the 70s, so formulated, the problem is the solution. Now that can sound a bit shallow and flippant. I think it's beyond that. I think being part of the solution rather than the problem, but really we're both, and we need to be both. I drive a car, and actually I've booked a flight to Germany to visit the family of a dear friend who died recently, who I grew up with and I played music with, like love miles. Okay, so I confess, I own up, I increase my carbon footprint occasionally, and I'm not apologetic about it. So we live in a time of I don't know, contradictions, and we are part of the problem. It's actually better than be this aloof sort of problem solver who not welcome. They're being shot as harbingers of an unwelcome change. If I can be actually credibly part of that, of everything, of the problem and the solution, I can meet people where they're at least try to. So then I've written down a few notes so that I get out what comes to my, or came to my mind yesterday. So yeah, I believe in my values. Actually, yes. Am I over time?
No, well, I'm loving listening to you. I could keep listening, but I think just in the interest of time, we might jump over to you, Julie, and then Thomas, any of those points, we can come back to those again, because I think all of the questions kind of intersect as well. So, but Julie, can you share any reflections that, you know, what motivates you, and do you see parallels with Thomas and aspects of his motivations?
Yeah, definitely. It was lovely to hear Thomas speak there. I mean, I think I really relate to the fact that I love a challenge. That's always something my dad has said to me. I never take the easy route. And the reason why I'm still living in the Ecovillage, we went through a period of very intense conflict here, maybe 5 years ago or so, for what felt like 2 or 3 years. I can't remember the exact timeline. And it did come up for me, you know, should I leave? Should I leave? Because that consider, and I just couldn't think of anywhere else I wanted to live. And I still can't, which is why I'm here and why I'm still doing what I do. And I think like I really, the community is something that it's a practice, and it's something we also need to practice. And I think one of the really lovely things is my 88-year-old dad has just come to live with me in the last month, and I'm seeing community afresh through his eyes. And he said he was walking up the path the other day and someone cycled past and said, "Hi, Ken." And he was just, I don't know when someone last said that to him, greeted him with his name. Maybe it could be a long, many years. For me, that's been amazing for me to be reminded and to see living here again with fresh eyes, which has been really lovely. And I think also I do, in terms of kind of future proofing and thinking about the future, I do feel that this is a good place to be in terms of, I think things are going to get more difficult in lots of ways I can imagine and can't imagine. And I feel that this is a good place to be. And it's a great place to raise my kids as well.
Thanks so much, Julie. And like listening to your webinar with the woman who wrote the book, Dr. Karen, can't remember her second name. I was just so inspired. I have 2 young boys, and I just thought, gosh, yeah, to be held in community of like-minded people, even going through all of the difficulties and challenges. Yeah, and it was lovely to hear from you, Thomas, as well, like both the piece of looking forward to the future, but then also being a good ancestor. That just feels so deep, like feels like a really important piece to hold in it all. And that's not, we don't hear it spoken. Profound as
Yeah, I just want to throw in, Julie. I didn't know. My father came to live at the Hollies, age 88,
wow.
and he lived in this house that I'm sitting here, just downstairs for 7 years until he died, age 95, and he was very happy here.
Wow.
Thank you. I just say very quickly, my dad came to observe one of our members' meetings about 2 weeks ago, because I just thought, well, it's Saturday afternoon, this is what we're up to, we'll bring him along. He'd never experienced anything like that before, and it was great to think, yeah, come along, come and listen to the conversations we're having. So yeah.
Fabulous. Wow, how interesting, both at 88 years of age. That's really lovely.
Maybe just pause on a couple of things from the call already. The first thing, the thought just occurred to me, particularly after Dolores' kind of wonderful introduction. Here we are, Thomas, Julie, and Chris. We're all from not round here. We're all from somewhere else. That's kind of relevant in some ways. That that happens really often. That people who are in some way or other not at home, and in some ways I think we can we could go like really not at home we are in this in this society, in this world, in this way of living. It's just not right what we're doing, and the way we're doing something. So we're kind of this sense of profoundly not at homeness, and we can do better. I mean, I really like this phrase which comes up sometimes where people say, we're better than this, like the reaction to the riots in Dublin or whatever. We're better than this. This is not Ireland. This is not going to be, and how we're going to do stuff together. And then I look at, what's it, 31 of us on this call, and I probably know maybe half the people, I haven't actually counted it out, but there's probably half the people on this call have been significant people in my life. And so that sense of community and potential, and I look around, and I'm not going to name names, so I'm not going to make it embarrassing, but there's somebody, I can see somebody here who's been a really senior person working on diversity in a multinational company, and who brings enormous experience into the group, and somebody else who's been a university professor with profile all over the world, and other people who have done really kind of small, local, amazingly wonderful things. And so just that sense of, I mean, it's a bit trite to say we're in it together, but that sense of, hang on a minute, there are loads of people bringing loads of good things, and in lots of ways, we don't know what we're doing, but we're slowly getting better at the processes for working together. So what Julie describes with the members meetings in Cloughjordan, I strongly suspect those members meetings are functioning better than they were 10 years ago. I kind of hope so, because I went to one or two of them 10 years ago, and if you're still I can see if you're still doing that, we're all in a bit of trouble. I see Maureen on the call who works with the INTO, the teachers union. We're slowly getting better at having conversations in schools about stuff that really matters. We're slowly getting better at acknowledging the mental health and the of the children and the teachers and the principals and everybody, and how that fits into a bigger meta crisis. So again, it's God, I'm full of cliches. We're on a journey, cliche. But we're bringing together diverse people. We're improving our processes. We're getting better, and that all kind of makes it kind of worth giving it a lash. And if we were getting worse, it probably would be worth giving it a lash as well. But anyway, I think we're getting better.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you. Yeah, and I love that piece around community and resilience together. And if we use take our inspiration from nature, and for an ecology to thrive, it needs to be complex and reliant on so many different species. And so, like, the diversity and people coming from other places, and the nourishment that brings to this land, and the wisdom that can then come from the people here, being inspired by people from all over. It's just such an important piece. And I suppose that leads us on to our next question, which is, how do we navigate complexity? And so I suppose just reflecting on your relationship with complexity in your own personal lives and in the work that you do, and how do you navigate it so it's not something that you fear? And then I suppose thinking of everyone who's here on the call, how, to inspire us all how to navigate complexity in our own lives. So I'll leave it open to any of the three of you who might want to come in on that.
I can flow a little bit because it kind of follows from just what I was saying, or certainly I'll start something. For me, the first thing is to actually have a kind of humility around it is complexity. It is impossibly difficult. There are so many parts of it. There are so many uncertainties. No one of us is able for this. It's this. And just to have that humility, people that we're not up to the job or anything like that. It's just the nature of this challenge is incredibly complex, incredibly challenging, and so it becomes a diversity question. It becomes a together question. It becomes a different ways in which we approach things. you know, whether that's our personal practice, meditation, whatever, whether it's in our community that we just have spaces where we hang out together, whether it's our relationship with nature being more spacious. And that's just so unlike what we're doing most of the time, where most of us are busy and stressed and closing down. And yeah, so I think a lot of what we're bringing is just a bit more time and space to make, and a bit more relationship to make a bit more possible.
I actually want to go to the very practical in terms of how I navigate complexity living in the Ecovillage community, and kind of just talk practically about some of the things we do. Like non-violent communication is really vital, like living in our community, and that's something that Chris alluded to when he probably came to our members meetings 10 years ago. Before a lot of us skilled up on non-violent communication, because oh my goodness, you just waste so much time and create so many problems when the our communication isn't skillful. And also we've really skilled up on facilitating of our meetings, and trying to skill up on our decision making as well, because if meetings aren't being facilitated effectively, people stop coming, you know, they start calling it a talking shop, which is what Thomas was talking about, you know, talk. Yeah, I mean, we're still in our documents committed to consensus decision making, but we're starting to use more sociocracy principles in our meetings, which is helping our meetings to be much more effective. But just and also in terms of navigating complexity, just building trust. So that just takes time, and that's the practice of living in community. When new people come here, I say to them, you know, this is like a practice. There was someone who came here about 10 years ago and talked about how eco-villages are a bit like monasteries used to be. They're kind of a bank of all the skills that have been lost, so that when society needs them again, and turn towards people who are practicing in different shapes or forms, and it doesn't just have to be eco-village, in order to kind of relearn those skills. And for me, like a huge thing is boundaries. I've had to really practice saying no, and I've also at times when we've had conflict in the community, I've put a lot of energy into holding the lines on some of the agreements that we have in place. I find it's one thing holding that agreement and keeping other people to that agreement and really holding the line. That can take a lot of energy, and I've suffered burnout from spending periods of time holding the line on certain agreements that are in place within the community. And I think also, like, I live in a rural place, so I need a portfolio career in order to make a living. I do several things, and you know, there was a centre by the Centre for Alternative Technology, CAT. Need 2,000 people for a viable local economy. We're about 850 people in Cloughjordan. So, you know, if you want an independent cine club, you run the independent cine club. And because we're living on that scale, there's so many things that we can't quite make work on an economic level yet, so that it requires a lot of voluntary input, because we're just living on that scale. We're not at the 2,000 people. And then we in a series, but again, just like minding ourselves. Thomas was saying there, he got really sick from burnout. That's we've devoted a whole webinar to that, which Chris will be managing and organizing and presenting, because that's such a huge part of what we do. Yeah.
No, I'm just thinking all those learnings throughout the years, and like leaning into the practices like the nonviolent communication and all of the different ways of being in community. Do you find that like you fear complexity less? Like, can you see like an evolution in how maybe you kind of backed away from it in earlier days? Or I'm just curious about that piece of like, how do we fear it less?
I think just by living it, because
Yeah.
then all of us just develop skills. Like I was going to say actually one thing I learned was when I was on the board of our service company here, and we're running the heating system, and every resident needs to be paying their bills. You know, some people don't pay their bills for certain reasons, and I had to work out a way, how can I speak to somebody? I don't want to write them an email or send them a letter. It's like they might live in the next street. I'm actually going to ring them. So just coming up with little techniques like that. I need to have a difficult conversation with them as a director on this particular company. I don't want to send them an email, so I'm going to ring them. Just finding, like, just trying to find techniques of trying to find a bit of space, but also keeping the connection as well. So it's just, yeah, just as I guess I just because I live it now, I guess I just don't think about it as much as I used to. Yeah.
Do you feel like you mentioned trust in one of your responses? Do you feel that has strengthened your resilience as well?
Definitely, just knowing I can call on people, you know, like, it's amazing here. We do a lot of car sharing, and I remember Joe, my husband, put an email out it was about 3 years ago. He had to go and do something and he didn't have the car to do it. And within 5 minutes, he's just like, I need to borrow a car. Within 5 minutes, someone comes back and goes, yeah, you can borrow my car that day. Like, and that's just really something we can count on. And I know I can count on that here. So that's huge. And when I just moved out of the inner city in Dublin 13 years ago, and my next door neighbour asked to borrow our car. She's a nice woman, great woman. And I said no. So because that trust wasn't there. So that takes time. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's beautiful. It's lovely that you share like the beginning and the tentative. Yeah. And actually, Thomas,
can I add something there?
Oh yeah, please.
Yeah, just to to throw a tiny spanner into the hunky-doriness of that, because I'm also a great believer in sharing cars, and initially we tried to share absolutely everything here at the Hollies, and then is tools, you know. As it turns out, if somebody asks me now, what do you share and what don't you share, and what is trust precisely, it's not just that I like somebody or that I would trust him with my life or something. It really depends. Do I trust them to run my chainsaw? Or do I trust, but because somebody might, like, what's the quality assurance in that? Now, this is a very technical mainstream word, but to me, it's not enough if somebody has done the 2 or 3 part training in chainsaw maintenance that I would trust them my chainsaw. Because do I trust them to actually practice the difference between, remembering that they put the right amount of oil into the can to be mixed with petrol, because if they don't, my chainsaw breaks when I use it, because they put in the wrong mix, or they didn't, like, it's very detailed stuff actually. So I don't give my chainsaw to everybody, but who I would give the car to. And the experience of certain things, so we actually share tools a lot less now at the Hollies, or there's certain tools that we don't share, or we don't happen to have it there when somebody asks me for it. Or some things might cause offense, but then it's good to sort of thrash it out. But everyday life is so busy and complex, and so something
maybe
that I want.
Maybe it's the trusting the self then, because actually, Thomas, I was inspired by Tim Schmidt. That's the talk you sent, and he said trust is the lifeblood of success. And so maybe, like you say, like, you have to be practical, and yet you're like, you learn how to really trust yourself and your yes and your no's, and like Julie spoke about boundaries as well.
I wouldn't lend my chainsaw to everyone in the community, and I definitely wouldn't share. I share a car with another household. There's plenty of households I wouldn't share a car with. So yeah, I would agree completely. Yeah.
And so in line with like our final question, because time is moving along, and that idea of building on our successes, composting our failures and building on our successes in this ever-changing landscape. And Yeah, I was you kind of threw me a bit with your debate around trust, because I was thinking of trust being the lifeblood of success and like moving on from there. But I'm really curious, maybe Chris, we could hear your words of wisdom around the theme.
Well, just it's kind of in the question, I think, that it is really important that it has to be okay to fail.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we have to just accept, working in complexity, it's incredibly challenging. There's all kinds of interconnections that we don't necessarily understand. There's, all kinds of unpredictability about it. We're going to try some stuff, and some, I mean, even just the words success and failure are problematic, I think. But we're going to try some stuff, and some things aren't going to go great, and that has to be kind of okay. In some ways, we have to celebrate it. I think part of it is we have to rethink the way we do plans or strategy, or those kind of words that we use. We work as if and this fits with the stuff I put in the chat about the Cynefin framework. We work as if we can actually predict things and we can actually manage things when we can't a lot of the time. So we end up needing to be more experimental, more taking a few risks, but hopefully sensible risks, particularly if chainsaws are involved. So we take a few risks, and then it's what happens to the relationships if stuff doesn't work out great. So if we try something and it doesn't work out great, in a good relationship, we're able to say, oh yeah, but we tried something and we learned something. What should we do now? Rather than, God, you were a bit crap, weren't you? And so for me, that attitude of, give it a lash, or, just try some stuff, come up with some experiments that are safe enough to fail, but even if we fail, even if stuff doesn't work, in some way we're still building the relationships. We're still actually increasing our collective capacity to do this journey. You're muted, Nicola, if you're going to come in.
Yeah, no, I think that just needs a bit of spaciousness around that even. I think it's, bringing it back to relationships is key.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that, maybe. Yeah. What happens to the relationship, you asked, Chris. And so when if trust is the lifeblood, there is something how we build the trust, and when it gets broken, not if it gets broken, it will get broken. Every time it gets broken, how do we mend it? That brings me to restorative practices. So what are the processes and the attitudes, the skills, and the meta skills? I use a term that was coined by Amy Mindell in her book Meta Skills, the spiritual aspect of skills. So the attitudes and the awarenesses behind the skills. So what are those attitudes and sort of heartfulness stuff that and what are the skills then? So if the skill is, for instance, conducting a go around and summarizing what we hear people say and leading on to the next thing, and so if those are the skills, what are the attitudes that we need for restorative practice to do what we need to do to mend the broken trust, so that we can go back to a trusting relationship, or maybe even notice it was never there, that trust that I had an illusion of. Now what can we do to actually start building it? And there are processes for that. And I think the attitudes are say no to perfectionism, let go of expectations, let go of the illusions of that I might actually, I think I know it better, you know, and the mainstream is wrong, and we have all the solutions. That was often in the early decades probably a bit of a mistake of some permaculturists, and probably ourselves as well, when we got started there. We were unaware of our biases or of our arrogance, but the other side is, as in local farmers, for instance, you know. Let's face it, the rednecks. So the us and them that was created by them and by us, and we thought we didn't, but we did, and they thought, you know, and even this so we're language, Jesus, and so the how do we deal with me and the other, this othering, you know, we do it at times. And what is this non-judgmental thing anyway? How it's something to be struggled with, and to embrace, and to keep trying, and to keep practicing, you know, building and repairing broken trust is so important. Forgiveness would be another meta skill. Anyway, that's as far as I get now.
Thanks, Thomas. Can you hear me? Yeah. Just following on from what you're saying, I think one of our challenges here in the Ecovillage, and it took me a while to realize that everyone is having their own experience here, not necessarily my experience. So, you know, I speak from my experience, and I'm also speaking for the Ecovillage a bit today. But I think one of our challenges is because we have all bought our sites and built our houses, we can't go anywhere necessarily. Now, some people have moved out now, but I think that's why we have to get endlessly creative. And I think one of the challenges that we have here is sometimes there's just not the capacity to do the restorative work, because some of those processes need a long time, and that's definitely something I think that we're finding challenging currently in the Ecovillage, is just a lack of capacity and time to devote the energy and time to certain restorative processes. And that definitely comes up against if you don't deal, I think I see here, if we don't deal with something, it will die down in one area, or a conversation that's going on in one working group, and suddenly I look around, I'm like, oh my goodness, it's popped up over there in a different working group. It just moves around. It's like a mole underground, and it will just kind of pop up. And I think, yeah, I just wanted to just speak to that. Yeah.
Thanks, Julie.
I think if I can add just to Julie that at the risk of over participating, trust. I think one of those meta skills would also be to trust that we don't actually have to do it all ourselves, or we don't have to do it at one moment in time. That flickering, that mole, Julie, that you mentioned, I think that's a good animal, and I like the metaphor. To trust it's enough, it's good enough. That helps me also to counteract my sort of tendency to be too intense and you know, burnout and all of that. It's enough. Take a rest. I don't have to do it. All others, it will be. Change happens anyway, whether I push or not. It's probably happens better if I don't push.
Oh, I love it. And you know what? We're really coming close to time where we'd love to open the floor up to questions from everybody, because there's such a wealth of wisdom here in our Zoom space. So I wonder, just before is there anything, Chris, did you want to come in on anything there, or will we move towards questions?
No, I'm really looking forward to the questions. As I say,
Okay,
I'm really
super.
aware that there's just loads of wise people in the room.
Absolutely. Okay, so if anyone wants to come on and speak their question, you can put your hand up, or that would be lovely. Or Eileen, I don't know, have you come across any question you'd like to read out?
So we haven't got that many questions, or we haven't anything. There's been a few comments, but not that many questions in the chat. Noreen Lyons says perhaps there is just one restorative journey, and that separation is the issue, so connection coming back. But there's one thing that I would like to bring up, and maybe we'll go to Maureen just after that. Conflicts of interest are a huge thing. In any kind of complex social system, we all have conflicts of interest. I mean, Thomas referred to it a little bit with his, I fly to Germany, but I also, actively discourage people from doing things like that. Those conflicts of interests in a complex system, the acknowledgement of those is huge. Acknowledgement that everybody and everything has what could be determined a conflict of interest. Because I think it's often the conflicts of interest that lead to mistrust. I read a piece, I can't remember the specifics, but it basically said that most people believe that their own motivations are purer than other people's motivations for exactly the same action. And an acknowledgement of that weakness and that dynamic, and then an acknowledgement that the other person, and that's where the trust comes in, is that if you can trust that the other person's motivations are as pure as yours, then you can start to build on that. But for me, the acknowledgement and the acceptance and even the encouragement of all of those conflicts of interest, because all of those conflicts of interest are connections to different things, and that's what builds your ecology stronger. I just wanted to say that. So maybe we'll, Maureen, if you want to come in, unmute yourself and come in with your question.
Thank you, everybody. That was fascinating. Very interested in what Chris said there about the feeling of being away from home. And I suppose I work for a very traditional organisation, the Irish National Teachers Organisation. I am very aware that I am a person for whom the education centre section or the education system has worked. But I am very rooted in my sense of place. And I think my education gave me that, as well as my community. I think the two worked very, very much hand in hand when I was in school in the 70s and the 80s, that we were given a really place-based education. And I'm fascinated by what moved us away from that. Because when I was growing up, I knew the name of every seaweed on the seashore and every shell and every tree and every plant and every leaf. And that was what was normal to me. And we played in farmers' fields and we helped bring it in the hay. And it sounds very idyllic, but it wasn't. It was just normal. And when I came to Dublin, I was fascinated by the fact that I walked into my staff room in Tala one day with a bunch of alder catkins, and that other teachers didn't know what they were, because I thought everybody knew what that was. I thought everybody was brought up in nature the same way I was, and I missed the change. And I think that's something that we really need to look at. When did the schooling that I got, which was so place-based and rooted in my community and the history and the geography and the inheritance and heritage of my community, when did that change? What happened? When did we take our eye off the ball? And why is it now so difficult for us to find our way back? And they're the questions for me. So I don't know if anybody has any more ideas on that.
Thanks, Maureen. I can come back a little bit. I mean, I think I very much agree with what Noreen's put in the chat about separation as the issue. So, in loads of ways, we've been kind of separating ourselves from our true selves. We're separating ourselves from each other as kind of various community bonds and so on get weaker. We're separating ourselves from nature. There's plenty of other ways we can interpret it as well. So we're living and we're in our structures. We separate academic subjects in school, which is one of the differences between primary school and secondary school, that primary schools have more ability to be more together and more holistic and more in their place. you know, in businesses, we separate the manufacturing function from the sales function, you know, and so on. And there's a kind of inevitability that you have to do that. But then we, you know, in all these separations, we create loads of difficulties for ourselves. And so, yeah, I absolutely think that the journey we're on needs to be a journey of healing, integration, coming back together, different parts of ourselves coming back together. You know, that's the work. And it just one more point is just to say, when you're talking about your childhood, Maureen, just to make the bridge, of course, a good bit of your childhood, I know, would have been Oskelga as well, which makes it a different experience and creates a little bridge into Martin and Pada and other people that will be working on the next webinar.
The next one. Thanks a million, Chris. Thank you.
If I may add there, Maureen, in my culture of origin, where I grew up in Germany, that separation happened at least a generation earlier. When I came to Ireland 25 years ago, in many ways, I thought I was catapulted a generation back. But that wasn't a good experience. I experienced the narrowness of that as well. And to me, you know, like I'm sure in this room there'll be different sort of denominations and religious beliefs or non-religious beliefs and so on. To me, it was what should I say, anguishing or something that everybody was actually flocking into the Catholic Church, except for the Protestants who were flocking into the Church of Ireland. Yeah. And then what was left at 25 years ago in rural Ireland to those who didn't fit into that? Oh, Jesus, they're the hippies.
Yeah.
Or the New Age travelers. There was such a, you know, and I grew up where my parents were dragging me against my will and against my discomfort into church every Sunday, because that was what they had to do as good Catholics, and I freed myself of that. You know, what I experienced as oppressive in many ways. I didn't trust the priests when I was 13 and 14 to hear my confessions. So I had to free myself of that. And then I came to Ireland, where everybody seemed to, you know, the parents, I was a parent at that stage, and the young parents were dragging their children to church, just as I was dragged there. And to me, you know, in my own life, I haven't thrown out the baby with the bathwater. To me, actually, the original message of Christ is meaningful, but not the way the church does it, or any of the churches do it. That is, to me, personally, not very meaningful, and I respect that it is meaningful to others. But there's something about that narrowness that I'm so glad that that stranglehold has sort of loosened a bit. Now, what you know, I think the people, I don't know, you know, I think the separation is much older. It's not that we lost it just now with industrialization or urbanization, and so I think we lost it maybe with Moses inventing monotheism. I'd like to quote my friend Dara Malloy on Inishmore. He's a former Catholic priest. Now he has 4 grown-up children and writes about the globalization of God is one of his books, and reimagining the divine. This is very place-based, and this is very spiritual, and it comes from the Celtic Christian tradition. And I think that could actually be an answer to help us work on that, you know, this dissolving that separation and coming to a more Brigid style religion. You know, it's actually Latin, and I'm a language person, so religare is actually to reconnect.
Unless somebody else wants to come in on that, Fionnuala O'Shukru has a question. You might want to unmute yourself, Fionnuala.
Good idea. No, just briefly, I wanted to ask Maureen about that. I'm interested in her experience because I'm reckoning we went to school sometime around the same time, maybe. But I went to school in Dublin, and I came through schooling and university without learning the names of plants or trees or anything, or any local history to where I was living in Dublin. So I had always imagined that right now that's changed, that in national schools there's a lot more focus on glass schools and on people coming in and speaking about biodiversity and all of that kind of place-based learning in schools. So I'm just interested that her impression.
Well, I will tell you, Fionn, that I will have a roundy birthday this June, and it is not 40 and it is not 50.
Yeah.
So I started primary school in 1968 and I left secondary school in 1981. And I was educated by the Presentation nuns in Youghal and the Loretta nuns in Youghal. The Presentation nuns were gentler on me than the Loretta nuns were, but was very much rooted in my place. And I remember fourth class in particular, where local history was the thing, and Sister Emer brought us out and we walked the town and we visited all the churches, the Presbyterian church and the Protestant church and the Catholic church, and we visited the factories where they made carpets and they spun cotton that came in from Mozambique and was turned into fabric in Youghal. And we did all of those things. We learned about the history of our town and the geography of our town, and we went and we visited farms and on the edge of the town and in the town, and saw people, keeping chickens and milking cows, and we're very and we learned about the river and the sea, and that we were part of that community, that we were people of the water. And that resonates hugely for me. And we had a reunion recently and we all had a very similar experience. We all remembered that experience of place, and a remarkable number of my compatriots are still at home. And those who are not at home, like myself, go home very regularly and are drawn back home.
But your sense, and through your experience in INTO, would you think that place-based learning is less so now in the curriculum, or is it?
I think it's coming back in. Yeah, I spent most of my career as a primary school teacher and a primary school principal up until 8 years ago. I was primary school principal for nearly 20 years in Maynooth, in Kildare, and I was an honorary bridie, and St. Brigid was very important to us. And yes, you have the green schools and all of that, but that is relatively recent. There is a big patch of time for today's teachers, I think, missed out on that. They're trying to implement it now, but it's a gap in their own education.
Okay,
Fáilteoireacht, Fibre Bay.
Míle mágah galéir. I just been looking at time. So Eileen, are you happy for me to? Did you want to come in on anything else? Okay. And just one thing that strikes me on this learning, like I think I feel like there's a lot of knowledge that we can put into our heads, and that's one amazing way of learning, and learning the place names and that. And I just feel also there's other ways of learning about the different aspects of nature in where we are and connecting with that. And I hope that also is brought into the curriculum, so that like those who are less kind of academically oriented can connect and feel that sense of place and connection, and that their way of engaging with it is honored as well. But yeah, it's wonderful to hear of your childhood and to build that bridge for today's children. And so I know that we want to hand over to Peadar after we've closed. And so I just thought that there's a beautiful, a piece from a poem by Grace Wells. She's based in Clare, and this is from Otter, which is published in Fir. And so just to read that to close it, and just to say thank you so much everyone for your presence, for your questions, for your insights. Thank you to our three speakers, Thomas, Julie, Chris. Thank you so much to Dolores. I think she may have had, or you're still there, Dolores. Thank you so much for being with us. and to everybody who was here today. So just to close on this poem before I hand you over to Pather, who will introduce our next webinar next Friday. This is from Otter, again by Grace Wells. And up from the liquid surface rose an otter diving to somersault, to divide in two and become a mated pair. Black as eels, but halo bright they circled, swimming me into their carnival, into a wider world. So that I want to say to you, do not fear your anguish. Despair births miracles. Hope is only waiting for release. Pay attention. The signs gifted are subtle. Small beads for the necklace of faith we must thread for ourselves. And so to hand you over to Pather. Thanks, Pather.
Thank you all very much for a most inspiring and enlightening experience. And I suppose we take up this time next week where we've left off now, and focusing in particular on that part of the imagination. So much of our action on climate change and biodiversity loss, we're reading reports, we're being informed, but are we touching hearts? Are we inspiring? And I suppose that's why we want to focus in one of our 5 webinars on Ag Fóscailt na Samhlaíochta, liberating the imagination. So it's liberating the imagination in broad terms. It's not that we're against science, but we need more than science. But it's also liberating our imagination in this place, in Ireland, and going back to the wisdom of our ancestors through the language that has been spoken by those ancestors for most of the time in which people have been living on this island, to go back to Maureen's beautiful story about her growing up in Youghal and linking us to a strong sense of place and valuing the ways in which our native language and the many, many practices associated with it. And I think Dolores' wonderful introduction about Brigid, Brigid, as of course is her original name, in Gaeilge, Brigid Neafa, agus Bondi a Brigid, that we root ourselves again in an easy way and an inspiring way into that many, many centuries of rich tradition and knowledge. Tríd an Gaeilge ní amháin ag labhart faoi thábhacht na Gaeilge ach ag blasú ag dor domúisteach I saol na Gaeilge mar inspiráid agus mar léargas nua, úr nua na féidireachtaí gur féidirling a bhaint as or tradiisiún hain gur linge é. Irish is the only thing of ours that's ours and is nobody else's, and sometimes we seem to treat it with less than the huge respect that it should be treated because of that. So next Friday at 12:30 again, do come back for a rich bilingual experience. For those people who don't have Irish, we don't want to exclude you, but we also want to draw you and seduce you into the wonders and the beauty and the inspiration of our native language. Míle
mágat, Pather. Thank you, everybody. And we look forward to seeing you back next Friday.